they're lining up Max Keiser right now from France. While we're getting him on the horn, I just want to go back to this Atlantic Monthly magazine article. The hero, Ben Bernanke, saved the global economy, so why does everyone hate him? So now they don't deny the fact that everybody hates him, and everybody hates the private Federal Reserve and knows it's the occupational force. But now we've got to be told that he's our savior, when that's a total lie. The villain. The left hates him, the right hates him even more. But Ben Bernanke saved the economy and has navigated masterfully through the most trying times. The globalist maneuvered us and bragged. The Economist brags, ooh, Goldman Sachs has conquered Europe without a shot being fired. What Napoleon and Hitler couldn't do. Oh, Financial Times of London. I mean, their memos are public. It's all a big joke. MF Global head, John Corzine, former head of Goldman Sachs, ripping people off. They're the ones devaluing the currency. They're the ones that created the derivatives. They're the ones that called all the shots and got rid of Glass-Steagall. All of them. These guys are bigger crooks than Bernie Madoff, than Ken Lay. Carbon taxes, all of it. This guy's recommending tax increases and austerity to put the economy into a cardiac arrest so they can buy it all up. And Max Keiser told us a year before the Iceland implosion that he was at the bar there in Reykjavik and the bankers were bragging to him because he's a former big shot stockbroker, TV host. They know who he is. Traded and worked with George Soros' son. A few months ago, he's in Greece. I don't know, 6 months ago now. Walks into the hotel. I went and looked it up later. Steve Jobs was actually blogging for, not Steve Jobs, Forbes. Steve Forbes was actually blogging for Forbes, bragging about how great it was to buy up everything. Well, Max Keiser walks into him, and he's like, Max, it's wonderful. We're imploding their economy and buying everything up. And then selling the public that the global corporations and the global banks are loaning money to Greece, and that Greece was bad. Greece had Goldman Sachs operatives, their president and others, sign them on to debt that wasn't theirs. The derivatives, the too big to fail. Now they're sending the very minions of the same banking structure in to be the presidents and prime ministers in Italy and in Greece. And they tried it in Iceland. The Icelanders said no. And then it turned out, surprise, surprise, 90+% of the debt they were being told was theirs, they had to pay for, wasn't even their debt. The British news was calling the Icelanders terrorists and saying Icelanders won't be allowed to fly to England if their government doesn't pay us the money they owe our banks. Turned out those banks criminally had hijacked Iceland. This is all on record, but the corporate whore media instead tells us that there are heroes. They went in and threatened martial law. This is on record. If Congress didn't give them a blank check in the banker bailout that was really a banker coup d'etat, which is French for coup d'etat. It's an attempt at a joke there from one of my favorite children's movies, Hop. I like Carlos, man. He's a good villain. Anyways, the point is that this is so insane. And now they want a global minimum tax. We're going to play that coming up here in just a little while. Joe Biden's called for this global tax. But I have an article here from the supposed left, from Mother Jones attacking yours truly, the rights Obama martial law fail. And it goes on to say he isn't doing anything scary. There's no NDAA. There's no torture. There's no taking executive orders for nuclear war and saying for any civil or economic emergency they can arrest everybody. I mean, that's what it says, but, they had it on the books before. Yeah, he's just expanding it. There's no TSA sticking their hands down your pants. Alex Jones is a bad man. And Bernanke's a hero. Okay, Max Keiser, you've exposed him as the world's greatest terrorist. What do you think of the Atlantic telling us that Ben Bernanke is a hero, and Goldman Sachs and Rahm Emanuel, that's also in there, are heroes? The whole thing is, this guy gave birth to the planet. Did you know the sun comes out in the morning, Max Keiser, because of them?
Hey, Alex. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, well, I get into the machinations, I like to look
at the actual banking crimes as they are being committed. Because when I was working on Wall Street, I was engaged in many of these tactics myself. So it's always fun to see how they're doing it these days. And my sources are very good. You know, last time I was on your show, I described a conversation between Jamie Dimon and John Corzine where Dimon threatened to kill Corzine. And everything that's come out since then, now the blanks have been filled in. So I've got pretty much the whole picture.
And you were proven correct. It was wired to London. He did know. He did order it. We have the head of the CME group saying he perjured himself. Now the memos are public. Of course, the CEO who ordered the bet stole the money. And that's like you catch a fox with a chicken in its mouth, and it tells you with blood dripping out, I didn't eat the chicken. I mean, it is off the chart ridiculous. What does all this signify? Yeah, give us the rest of the story of why he looted the private accounts, where it's all going, and will he get in trouble, or will he be given some prize by the FBI for being a good citizen?
Yeah, well, I think the way the story is being portrayed right now, they don't really have it correct. I mean, the story really is J.P. Morgan or Jamie Dimon attacking MF Global. And this comes out of the whole recent era of the too big to fail banks getting even bigger. You know, as a result of the 2008 crash, you have Bank of America bought Countrywide and Merrill Lynch. Wells Fargo bought Wachovia. J.P. Morgan bought Bear Stearns. And
let me stop you, Max, because I want to be able to hear you. Are you building a barn or something? Because it sounds like you're sawing and stuff.
Oh, really? Is that any better now?
It just sounds like you're banging on things. Yes, sir, you've got the floor. Just don't...
I might be banging. Okay, how's this sound better?
There's that.
So they got these too big to fail banks. They're getting even bigger. And as a result, they've become very predatory. So J.P. Morgan sees over at MF Global on their books, they have this huge leveraged Eurobond position. Now, you have to also remember that J.P. Morgan, the MF Global is a client of J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan is their clearing bank, their custodian bank, their creditor. You could almost say that MF Global is a subsidiary of J.P. Morgan. So they know, J.P. Morgan knows everything going on at MF Global. They know their balance sheet, they know their position. So when the timing was right, J.P. Morgan tells MF Global that we need $175 million margin call. We need $175 million. And of course, they know that they don't have that money. Corzine says, look, we don't have the money. And it was at that time that the famous conversation went down where Jamie Dimon essentially threatens to have him killed. You know, like John Perkins talks about the economic hitman.
He'd go into the Pentagon, meet with generals. If he couldn't get people to take the money and the sex, they sent in hitmen.
Right. So Corzine says we don't have it. There's a threat to kill him. And then soon thereafter, what we now know from testimony is that Corzine goes into the customer accounts. He transfers $200 million of that customer money into a separate entity. He then calls up J.P. Morgan and says, look, I got the $175 million. I'm going to send that over to you guys. Notice it's not $200 million because that would be too obvious. He uses a slightly different number, this $175 million versus $200 million. And, of course, J.P. Morgan is kind of shocked because they're trying to throw MF Global under the bus because they want access to this huge leveraged Eurobond position. So Jamie Dimon and J.P. Morgan at that point, they request from MF Global that they send over written confirmation that this money is not coming from customers because they know it is coming from customers. But they want written confirmation that it's not coming from customers because they realize what's going on. Now that written confirmation never materializes, but that money nevertheless goes over to J.P. Morgan. So now J.P. Morgan has committed crimes 3 different ways. They've purposely thrown the company under the bus. They've instigated customer theft of funds, and they willingly and knowingly took stolen money. Shortly thereafter, of course, the firm goes bankrupt. And this is where we see the payoff, because that huge leveraged bond position gets sold off into the market to George Soros. George Soros fences that position, that multi-hundred-million-dollar euro position, makes a ton of money, of course, because he's working with J.P. Morgan, and he's a client of J.P. Morgan as well. And they fenced this out to Soros before this all goes down. And we see the progression of yet another bank, Heist, and another incidence of too big to fail getting bigger. And it's all orchestrated from the side of J.P. Morgan. And John Corzine is a bit of a patsy in all this.
All right, well, let me expand on that, though, because I was looking at the connections with Obama and Goldman Sachs and the head of the EPA formerly being Goldman Sachs, and then all these third world countries, the presidents are Goldman Sachs, and then the finance minister is Goldman Sachs. I mean, literally over 8 out of 10 presidents or finance ministers in the world. I just randomly have started looking up the names of African country leaders, Latin American, New Zealand, European. It's Goldman Sachs, Goldman Sachs. I know J.P. Morgan Chase is bigger. I know they're the big Federal Reserve shareholders, all that, heart of the New World Order. I know they're bigger. But then is like Goldman Sachs the technician team that, I mean, what's that relationship there? Because I just see Goldman Sachs operatives everywhere. The money is being funneled back to J.P. Morgan. Is that like Don Corleone up on the hill or something? And then what, A, and then B, what's going to happen to Corzine or whoever? I mean, now, do people perjure themselves and a bunch of money goes missing and no one gets in trouble? Because that signal is going to destroy confidence.
Well, no, the J.P. Morgan is at the top of the pyramid, really, because they're the ones working directly with the Fed. J.P. Morgan has on their books over $90 trillion in derivatives. They have something like 25% of the global derivatives business is right on J.P. Morgan's books. And they also have Blythe Masters, who invented the credit default swap. So when people are frustrated, for example, when the price of silver gets knocked down or the price of gold gets knocked down, that's Blythe Masters. He's in the market terrorizing these markets with these naked credit default swap contracts. That he floods the market with these sell orders, these bogus flash orders to manipulate the prices. So that's all at J.P. Morgan as well. Goldman Sachs is their specialty, as you pointed out earlier. They're more out in the Eurozone. They've destroyed Greece. They're attacking Portugal. They're undermining Spain. They've totally corrupted Brussels. They're really trying. They're all over Europe. I mean, I live 3 blocks from their France headquarters, so I see those guys all the time going in and out of there with their briefcases and shiny loafers, plotting to destroy various countries for a quick buck. But mostly it's J.P. Morgan and Jamie Dimon, who's, of course, whispered to be the next Treasury Secretary after Timothy Geithner. I guess they would have to do some kind of huge flash crash first to create a huge crisis to slip that smelly, putrid appointment under the noses of the people. But which I expect that coming, by the way. We are on the cusp of another huge downdraft based on the growing instability of these markets due to the fact that all that happened in the last 36 months is that the central banks added $15 to $20 trillion of bad debt to their books. They can't service that debt. The economies aren't growing enough to service the debt. So there's going to be, we're definitely on course to what we've been saying on your show now for 2 years, of some kind of global devaluation. You mentioned earlier a global tax mentioned by Joe Biden. We've talked about this many times on your show. The reason there's an income tax in America is to pay the interest on the debt for the Federal Reserve Bank. When you create a global reserve bank, like they are in the process of doing, to roll up all these bad debts into special drawing rights or some new global currency, they will have to create a global tax to pay the interest on this new debt. That's the plan. Hello?
World, they're announcing that world government is going to take everybody's liberty for their own good. They're announcing how lucky we are to have this happening. What heroes Jamie Dimon and, of course, Bernanke are, and why does everybody hate him? I mean, that's the actual headline here in the Atlantic. Ben Bernanke saved the global economy, so why does everybody hate him? And, of course, he's just a front man for these guys. But we know they want to raise taxes, cut benefits, and keep taking over. But now people are learning that they're the authors of our doom. Everybody's buying guns. I don't see them at the end of the day getting away with this. What's their exit strategy? What are they thinking? Or are they so crazy, it's like, why upgrade the nuclear reactors? Let them blow up. I mean, it's just like total psycho behavior.
Well, I just saw a report that was saying why the pink slime, which they've discovered is 20% of the hamburger meat in America, it really is a good thing. And that people shouldn't disparage the wonderful qualities of pink slime.
It's got ammonia in it. Cancer's good. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
So if you own all the media outlets, except yours, of course, if you own all the other media outlets, and you can create any reality you want. And if see, the great thing about financial terrorism, and we saw this in 2008, you know, they tried to pass that bailout, $750 billion. Hank Paulson went before Congress, and the initial vote was no. Then, of course, he just instructed his boys on Wall Street to hit the sell switch. There was a mini crash, and it scared the Congress people into voting yes. Same thing in Europe, same thing in Greece. To get the people to sign on, they staged these horrific financial terrorist attacks to stock market crashes, and then the people are panicked into voting whatever they're going to vote. So this is great, but this is great about having algorithmic trading, computer trading. So over 70% of all the trading on the exchanges is computer generated, and all the computer generated trading is by algorithmic program trading that are created in the Wall Street banks. And you create an algorithm, a program that says, okay, when certain conditions are X, Y, and Z, we're going to dump $1 trillion in orders, sell orders into the market, naked sell orders, flash crash, and we're going to create a political reality that way.
So what is its final end game then? Where does it go? Just bankers slaughtering everyone, drinking gallons of blood, dancing around like Nero?
Well, the trend toward consolidation in the banking industry is picking up speed. I imagine at the end there'll be 2 or 3 major mega banks run by 2 or 3 people who have net worths. You know, what the biggest guy in the world has a net worth that's 50 billion or 60 trillion. I would imagine that at the end you'll have people with net worths of like a country, $400 billion.
Stay there. Let's go ahead and play this short clip. This is Biden yesterday. We want to create a global minimum tax because your tax money, as Max was pointing out, income taxes globally. What year we get the Federal Reserve? 1913. What year we get the income tax? 1913. What year we get the federal investigative groups that were set up to knock heads? You guessed it. Everything 1913. What year they get rid of the senators being appointed by the states? 1913. Oh, you didn't know that? The states used to run things? Yeah. Max Keiser's our guest. Let's go ahead and go to this short clip of Joe Biden, a global minimum tax. Here it is.
We want to drop the rate, particularly for high-tech manufacturers like you, Mr. President, even further than the 20%. We want to create what's called a global minimum tax because American taxpayers shouldn't be providing a larger subsidy for investing abroad than investing at home.
What a way to push global government is to claim somehow it'll help Americans. It's total bull. That's what the OECD and others say. They want an 85% global average tax rate, but he calls that lower. That's called lying to crowds. Max Keiser, that's what the globalist plan is. One mega bank over the world, privately owned, with a giant UN, global government, corporate, NATO peacekeeping army, stealing and robbing from everybody and tearing up our roads and giving us dirt roads. Basically the Hunger Games, Agenda 21. Can they get away with it, is the question, Max Keiser.
Well, if you're going to use fiscal policy or tax policy, there's $5 trillion of foreign exchange or Forex traded every single day. By applying a 0.001% tax on those transactions, which are all derivative transactions that benefit nobody except the top bankers, you would raise all the money you could ever want to raise. So Joe Biden, if he had any kind of financial literacy whatsoever and wasn't just stumping for a global central bank to continue this global nightmare and roll up a big tranche of phony debt. I mean, that he would talk about something like that, but that makes sense. What he's talking about is just more of the same.
Max, what about the left, the so-called left, criticizing myself and others for worrying about a police state? They're like, ha, 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 look, this guy thinks there's a police state. They don't call this a police state, what's already been set up?
You know, talking about the left for a second, there was a great piece by Matt Taibbi on his blog today talking about how the Tea Party and the Occupy Wall Street movements are joined at the hip, because the Tea Party is right in that there is no government regulation, and that the Occupy Wall Street movement is also right in that you've got this huge concentration of wealth at the very top. For example, Ray Dalio, he is a hedge fund manager in Greenwich, in Westport, Connecticut. He paid himself $3.6 billion in compensation last year. That's B with a billion. $3.6 billion in compensation. He runs hundreds of billions of dollars for people. And when you have folks, individuals, like back in 1993, George Soros famously broke the Bank of England. It was the first time an individual who ran a hedge fund challenged a country. He broke the Bank of England. He crashed the British pound, and he made $1 billion in 1 week. Now, all the hedge funds since then have been trying to be like Soros, amass huge amounts of money under management, and as we saw with Greece, that was cooked up with John Paulson, another hedge fund manager, and Lloyd Blankfein, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, and...
Hold on, finish that thought. Back in 60 seconds. By the way, tonight, The Secrets of Prometheus, InfoWars Nightly News, PrisonPlanet.tv. And the 74th annual edition of the Hunger Games from Region 6. I saw a comment on a blog where they had the radio show posted. They're like, what is this, the Hunger Games, Region 6? That's art imitating life. You understand? And this isn't art. This is life we're covering here. People say, well, the Hunger Games is anti-New World Order. How are you saying it's a conditioning tool? Because it's shown as fiction. It acclimates people. And what you see in films like that is exactly what the globalists had planned. I'm not saying the person's either good or bad. I don't know. Side issue, I just thought I'd throw that out there. Max Keiser, maxkeiser.com. I should have pointed that out. TV host, researcher. Max, finish your point about where you see all this going. And then I want to ask you, what made you wake up, even though you were very successful in everything, and leave the stock market and then expose it?
Well, to finish off my point, going back to Soros in '93, he was the first individual to crash a country. And so these super wealthy hedge fund managers and bankers have been doing that ever since, and they're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And as a result, you now have individuals who are bigger than countries, and we're seeing them crash countries to make a profit. And they're making lots of profits. And I just saw a very interesting tweet fly by in my tweet stream here that fuel is being rationed to British ambulances. So the price of fuel is so high now in Britain because of the money printing, because of the banking terrorism, because Mervyn King, the chairman of the Bank of England, is a stooge for the ruling class. The price of gas is so high, petrol, that ambulances can't afford it. Now, this is having a direct impact. This is called financial repression, when the central banks keeps the jackboot of their manipulation on interest rates so that they're near 0%. This means that money is opening a gash in the economy, and money is flooding in with that 0% rate and driving things like fuel costs higher. And while pensioners who rely on retirement income and higher interest rates can't survive. And this is all done in the name of liquidity and helping the economy, but it only helps the speculators. It only helps the top banking class, and it's causing this financial repression and huge dislocation, and it's all engineered by design, and it's pitiful. And both the right and the left are beginning to understand this. So when you asked about what do I think about this hit piece of you in a recent left-wing piece, it's unfortunate because there's now so much common ground between all disparate groups. If you're not a Goldman Sachs partner, you're in trouble. So there's no time, or it's a waste of energy to focus.
Well, exactly. We're seeing open classical police state corruption And I'm just saying, hey, let's get our freedom back. And I've got the right wing and the left wing. I forgot a bunch of other publications on the right attack me over saying Obama is power grabbing now and using the military domestically. Because establishment right wing, they love that. They loved it when Bush did it. They're a bunch of establishment types claiming they're left wing or right wing. They're not even in the left-right paradigm. They're in the establishment's paradigm. And as you pointed out, Goldman Sachs is going to betray them.
Right. If you go amongst the top of the top, you know, they hate each other because this guy has got $1 billion more than this guy.
Exactly. But briefly, why did you get out of it? Briefly.
Well, I don't really feel as though I ever have gotten out of it. You know, my point, I feel that gold and silver are going to be incredible winners. But you say you did bad things on the stock market. Why did you stop doing that? Oh, well, I went on vacation to Paris back in 1990, and I fell in love with Paris, and I just said, it's not worth it. I'm going to retire, and I retired.
And now you expose what was going on. Well, Max Keiser, maxkeiser.com, thank you so much for the time. Hopefully we can do an hour interview in the near future. People find out more at maxkeiser.com. Find out more with us at Infowars.com tonight, 7 o'clock. Prometheus. Oh, it's something special. Infowars Nightly News. Thank you, Max.
All right, Al.